good morning. Welcome again to the Hydrogen and Fuel Cells and Batteries Group Exhibit 2016. My name is Robin, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Antoine Mazas is the Managing Director at Air Liquide. Thank you very much for joining us. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
The topic today is how hydrogen is contributing to the global energy challenge, which is a really, really big topic.
It is.
So we'll start a little bit about, if you don't mind telling us a bit about Air Liquide.
Yes, a couple of words about Air Liquide for those who may not know yet this company. So Air Liquide is a world leader in gases, services, technologies for industry and for healthcare. This is a global industrial group, of course, present in 80 countries all over the world, with a head office in Paris and listed on the Paris Stock Exchange. We serve in various business lines, different activities, more than 1 million customers all over the world. And we have as well more than 1 million patients in our healthcare activities. So, a global company which is, of course, extremely strongly engaged in hydrogen development as well. This is not from yesterday. This is already a long story. Air Liquide and hydrogen, we are serving our industrial customers since more than 50 years now with hydrogen for very various types of industry processes. What is, I would say, more recent from this perspective is the development of hydrogen as an energy carrier, meaning that we are using hydrogen not only for industry uses, but as an energy carrier with a specific focus on mobility. Not only, but with a specific focus on mobility. And our discussion today is how hydrogen is contributing to the global energy challenge. So I will give, of course, a couple of examples about what we are doing at Air Liquide. I will try also to highlight a couple of key points, key facts that are currently in focus if we want together, if the whole sector want hydrogen to be a very strong pillar of the energy mix tomorrow.
Fantastic, thank you. And I should mention that we'll take questions from anyone at the end, please. I would be happy to. I wanted to ask you, we've heard about the electrification mobility field, and the long term has already started 2 years ago. So where does Air Liquide play a role here?
So first, maybe a general comment on this. We firmly believe that the electrification, especially in transportation, this is a massive trend. This is a long-term trend. This has already started, and this cannot be stopped anymore. You probably, all of us, read in the news that immediately after the announcement of their new electrical model, Tesla received more than 325,000 orders within 1 week for their next electrical car. This means that they have pre-orders of more than $14 billion for a car which is not yet produced. For me, that's really amazing. And this is a very strong signal that there is a demand. There are expectations from the customers from electrical cars. And with hydrogen, we are, of course, talking about electrical cars, because the fuel cell vehicles, these are fuel cell electric vehicles. So battery cars, fuel cell cars, they all are part of these electric vehicles. A massive trend, expectations from the final customers. That's why the industry is working very hard right now to prepare for this electrification, to be ready in terms of infrastructure. This is valid, of course, for both battery cars and hydrogen cars, because on the one hand, you have to build the loading stations for the batteries, and on the other hand, you have to build the fueling stations for the hydrogen. And this is the area where Air Liquide, together with a couple of partners, is very active, very committed. Here, of course, in Germany, but not only here, all over the world. In Europe, very strongly, we have built in the last months, in the last years, stations. So in Germany, of course, in France, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Denmark, where we have already a small network of stations. We are building stations in the United States, not only in California, but also on the East Coast, where we have a very important project together with our partner Toyota. We announced that we would build, and this is ongoing, 12 stations on the East Coast, and this will be the first refueling network in the East Coast in the United States. We have built and opened a couple of stations in Japan as well. We have other development plans on which I cannot disclose too much, unfortunately, today, but with a bit of patience, you will be informed in due time about those projects. So we are very active, very committed, very engaged. And in the next years, we have a construction program for the infrastructure, not only, but the hydrogen infrastructure for the cars. This is the main focus today, in order to help this market to start and to ramp up. Something very important that people have to keep in mind is we have to manage parallel a long-term effort and to achieve short-term results. Long-term efforts because this is, of course, a long-term perspective. The electrification of the automotive fleets, this is not from one day to another. This is an effort of several years, 5, 10, 15 years. You probably remember when in Europe, for instance, the automotive fleet started with diesel. It took almost one generation, 25, 30 years, so that a very significant market share was achieved for diesel cars. So we'll not have, within 2-3 years, 30, 40, 50% of the cars which will be powered by hydrogen. It will be longer. But what is very important is how the industry prepares the ramp-up. Because the ramp-up will be as follows. This is starting now. This is starting with let's say, small slope in terms of ramp-up. During the next years, we anticipate that the deployments of the car OEMs will be quietly, steadily growing. But once it will have started, the ramp-up will be really exponential. So for those who have interest in this, you can just have a look on the sales of the Prius by Toyota. That's extremely interesting. With the first Prius model, which was commercialized by Toyota during about 7 years, at the beginning the sales were quiet, with a quiet increase. And then came the second model, 2004, and then you had really an exponential increase of the sales. Meaning that Toyota, they had the patience, they believed in their model, they believed in the technology, they improved it, and they had the patience to wait for this second ramp-up phase. And now everybody knows how successful is this model. It has an extraordinary market share in the US, not only in the US, in Europe as well. It was the pioneer for hybridization, paving the way for all sorts of models, hybrid models, which came a bit later. And today, of course, the hybrids are really part of the offer of the car OEMs. Another interesting signal is that for the first time in the history, we have now in the market some car OEMs which propose the same model with conventional engines, hybrid model, battery model, fuel cell model. And this is the first time we have, for the same model, the 4 types of motorization. For me, that's also a signal that we are going towards a portfolio of different technologies which are adapted for different uses, for different kind of customers. And hydrogen is, of course, part of this solution.
So, which company is it that's doing this, or is it all across the board?
I will not advertise for a company in particular, but there are not only one, but a couple of them. And you have to look for the companies who have already started commercializing fuel cell cars.
That's fantastic.
This is already an indication.
In relation to COP21 Paris in 2015, how do you see the whole sector moving?
Good question. I think this was a very important milestone in the international move for tackling the climate change challenge. I think, if I remember well, more than 160 countries signed those agreements in Paris a couple of months ago, COP21, and just a couple of days ago, there was the official signature in New York City by all those countries. Quite strong commitments from those countries, a real international dynamic, which will push more and more for environmental friendly solutions. And of course, hydrogen from this perspective is part of the agenda. I can name a couple of very interesting projects which were deployed by Air Liquide in the last months. We are not the only one active in that field. There are many of other examples. But for Air Liquide, we have, for instance, together with a partner, started the first taxi fleet with hydrogen cars in Paris. And this was parallel to the negotiations of the COP21. So a couple of months ago. Quite successful project. Some hydrogen taxis serving customers in Paris, and this is really a first of its kind as a project in Europe. On the technology side, we inaugurated a couple of months ago a very interesting technology which is named CryoCap, which enables to capture the CO2 from the steam methane reformers, which allows for large-scale economic hydrogen production, meaning that we have already today in operation technologies which allow an economic large-scale production of hydrogen. And this is, of course, very important because all those developments make sense if you are able to deliver to the final customer CO2-free hydrogen, because of course, at the point of use in the car, you do not emit carbon dioxide. That's obvious because you are only emitting water as waste, but you have to deliver CO2-free hydrogen if you want, of course, to improve the CO2 emissions of the transportation sector. So, long story short, but we have inaugurated in France, in Normandy, this system, CryoCap, a large industrial facility allowing for capturing the CO2 produced in the large steam methane reformers. A couple of another examples. We have opened officially last week in Brussels the first public stations in Belgium. So it was also a great event with a lot of various personalities, very good coverage, together with our partner Toyota. We plan in the next months to open a number of stations here in Germany. We are working very closely with a number of partners, for instance, Hyundai in the region of Frankfurt, where we have a project together to build a fueling station there. In progress, work in progress. So these are a couple of examples of the recent achievements of Air Liquide in that field.
Thank you. A reality.
A reality.
Of course, there's always the role of the public authorities to be considered. From the market point of view, and what do you think countries have to implement, like the US and so on?
That's another very good point. Of course, the public authorities have a major role in the development of that story. They have to promote the technology, they have to encourage the technology, they have to help the industry, to support the industry in this phase where that we call the valley of death, meaning that we are building the infrastructure. We have, for this infrastructure, a limited number of cars, if we take the example of mobility. So the industry is committing a lot of money and making limited, let's say, limited sales. So you have a period of a couple of years where you have large amounts of money which are committed, large cash out with limited revenues. And we are working very closely with the public authorities in different kind of public-private partnerships so that there is a co-funding of those initiatives by the industry and by the public authorities. Okay? So we receive public subsidies for building the infrastructure, and this is extremely important at this stage. Another example is how can the governments support the final customer in the acquisition of fuel cell cars. You have a number of existing incentives in Europe, for instance, and we are very, very glad that, for instance, the German government announced very, very recently in the last days that there will be some incentives also for supporting the private customers who will buy electric cars. A couple of €1,000. This is already in place in France. We are very happy that the German government took this decision as well. And these are the positive signals helping people to just to make the next step and to go for the further motorization, to go for an electrical car.
To encourage them to take the next step. Yeah?
To encourage them to take the next steps, absolutely. And that's very important. That's very important. So this is only with a close cooperation between the private stakeholders and the public stakeholders that will make this story a successful story. And we have to say, up to now, we receive a very good support from the public stakeholders, especially here in Germany, where there is a very strong commitment from the government. There was in the last weeks also the announcement of the second NIP, which is the funding plan of the German government for hydrogen technologies. And for the period 2016-2018, the German government confirmed or officially announced in the last day that 160 million euros are committed to help finance those projects, which is of course a very important and very, very strong signal also for the industry and for the entire sector.
That there's faith that we're going places, of course,
absolutely,
is the reality.
Absolutely.
We have just a couple of minutes left. Are there any challenges that we can discuss for Air Liquide?
Challenges we have, of course. This is a work in progress. In the last years, there were extraordinary improvements made with the technology. We are still working on it. This is true for the cars. This is true for the fueling infrastructure. This is true for the way the projects are implemented. We are looking for innovative financing mechanisms. We are looking for innovative project structure. We created a joint venture together with 5 other partners, which is called H2 Mobility. This is a very original way to build the infrastructure here in Germany. There were a couple of presentations before, so I will not talk too much about this, but this is a joint venture, 6 partners, to build in the next 10 years up to 400 stations, hydrogen refueling stations in Germany, to create the first hydrogen network here in Germany. And this is a prolongation of the efforts made by the industry and by the government within the first demonstration project in Germany, which started in 2006, so already 10 years ago. This project is the Clean Energy Partnership. And within this Clean Energy Partnership, there were already a lot of very good results which were achieved. And we are continuing the effort with our industry colleagues, together with the automotive industry, together with the government and with the public stakeholders.
Thank you very much.
Maybe 1 minute or one question from the audience. I don't know if there are some.
That was my next question. Any questions from the audience that we can available? Oh, please. 1 second.
Here, a question.
Hello. I work for the Max Planck Society, and I would like to know how do you produce the hydrogen and what energy it costs to produce 1 liter of hydrogen?
Okay, so how do we produce the hydrogen? So you probably know that there are very different ways to produce the hydrogen, which makes also this energy carrier especially interesting. You can produce it from renewable energy, of course. You can produce it from renewable electricity through water electrolysis. You can produce it through biomethane, biogas, biomethane. You can produce it from natural gas with CO2 capture, as I mentioned during the talk. And those different processes have various efficiencies, because I think this is the meaning of your question. So what is the efficiency of those different processes? So for water electrolysis, you have to account for 5 kilowatt-hour per normal cubic meter of hydrogen produced. For steam methane reforming, you have to account for a large-scale industrial facility, energy efficiency close to 90%, if you're able to use the steam which can be produced as well as a byproduct. So this is nothing which could prevent hydrogen from developing in the next years. And on top of that, you have, of course, something very important I didn't mention during the presentation, which is the ability to store renewable intermittent energy with hydrogen, while providing control power services to the grid to help the grid balancing between the electricity production and the demand of electricity. You can produce hydrogen on demand. And of course, if you have hydrogen cars, for instance, you use the hydrogen produced that you can store for hydrogen-powered cars. Okay? So, of course, we are very active in organizing the bridge between the production of hydrogen and the way hydrogen will be used, for instance, in the transportation sector.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Thanks for asking that question. Just want to let you know the booth, Air Liquide's booth is in B50, which is just down the hall on the left there. Please feel free to continue any questions over there. Thank you so much for being with us and giving us all of your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have a panel discussion in German with my colleague Juli. Thank you very much.